Some men build empires, others conquer hearts. Aristotle Onassis did both, and in the end lost everything that truly mattered. The man who once commanded the largest private shipping fleet in the world, who married a president's widow, who turned a Greek refugee's determination into billions, spent his final years broken by a tragedy money couldn't prevent. This is the story of how the world's most famous billionaire discovered that all the wealth in the world can't protect you from life's cruelest blows. The burning of Smyrna. September 1922. 16-year-old Aristotle. Onassis stood on the deck of a ship watching his birthplace burn. Smyrna, the cosmopolitan port city where he'd grown up speaking 4 languages and attending prestigious schools, was being consumed by flames as Turkish forces recaptured it from Greek control. The Great Fire of Smyrna wasn't just burning buildings. It was incinerating the Onassis family's fortune, their property holdings, their entire world. Born on January 20th, 1906, in the Karata suburb of Smyrna, Aristotle had grown up in comfort. His father, Socrates Onassis, was a successful tobacco merchant and shipping entrepreneur with a modest fleet of ships. The family belonged to the city's prosperous Greek community, and young Aristotle attended the local evangelical Greek school where he learned Greek, Turkish, Spanish, and English by age 16. The future looked bright for a boy with such advantages. Then history intervened. After World War I, Smyrna had become part of Greece. But the Greco-Turkish War of 1919 to 1922 changed everything. When Turkish forces retook the city in September 1922, they set it ablaze. The catastrophe was devastating for the city's Greek population. 3 of Aristotle's uncles, an aunt, her husband, and their daughter were burned to death in a church in Akhisar, where 500 Christians had sought shelter from the advancing fire. The Asia Minor catastrophe of 1922 transformed the Onassis family from comfortable merchants into refugees, fleeing with whatever they could carry. The family escaped to Greece, settling in Athens with hundreds of thousands of other Greek refugees from Asia Minor. They had survived, but they'd lost nearly everything. The property, the business connections, the security, all of it gone in smoke and chaos. For young Aristotle, watching his world collapse around him, the lesson was clear and brutal. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is safe. The only thing you can rely on is yourself. But there was something else. In losing everything, Aristotle discovered he had nothing left to lose. That liberation, combined with the desperation of a refugee who'd tasted wealth and couldn't bear poverty, created a dangerous combination. A hunger that would drive him to rebuild not just what his family had lost, but to build an empire that would dwarf anything his father had imagined. Within a year, Socrates Onassis had resisted at first, but eventually supported his 16-year-old son's decision to leave Greece and start fresh in Argentina. On August 21, 1923, Aristotle landed in Buenos Aires with $250 in his pocket and a Nansen passport, the document issued to stateless refugees. He had no connections, no guarantees, no backup plan, just ambition and the understanding that he'd already survived the worst. Buenos Aires and the birth of a tycoon. Buenos Aires in 1923 wasn't kind to Greek refugees. Aristotle took whatever work he could find, starting as a hod carrier and dishwasher before landing a job with the British United River Plate Telephone Company as a night shift switchboard operator. The position paid poorly, but it gave him something far more valuable than money. It gave him information. Working the night shift left his days free, and Aristotle used that time to help revive his family's tobacco business. His father and uncle had already founded a tobacco export business in Piraeus, and they began sending Turkish tobacco to Argentina. But young Aristotle needed customers, and Argentine cigarette manufacturers weren't interested in meeting with a teenage refugee. That's when his switchboard position became his secret weapon. Working nights, Aristotle eavesdropped on business calls. He learned about deals being made, contracts being negotiated, opportunities emerging. He used that insider knowledge to set up deals of his own, operating as an important businessman during the day, music, while still working the phone lines and coveralls at night. His big break came in the mid-1920s when he overheard a conversation about a new talking picture where the main character would smoke cigarettes. Aristotle immediately grasped the marketing opportunity. If smoking was about to become glamorous in the new medium of film, cigarette sales would explode. He needed a brand that women would aspire to smoke, something elegant and sophisticated. He approached Juan Gauna, owner of Argentina's most successful cigarette company, stalking him for days until Gauna finally agreed to talk. The audacity worked. Gauna placed an immediate order for $10,000 worth of Turkish tobacco from the Onassis family business. Then Aristotle took another bold step. He created his own cigarette brand, Music, aimed specifically at women whose smoking habits were changing as the feminist movement and women's emancipation gained momentum in the interwar period. For his brand ambassador, he persuaded the famous opera singer Claudia Musio to publicly smoke his cigarettes. The campaign was brilliant. By age 25, Aristotle Onassis was a music millionaire, earning over $100,000 from tobacco commissions alone. The Greek government, recognizing his business acumen, made him consul general and asked him to negotiate a trade agreement with Argentina in 1928. He obtained Argentine citizenship in 1929. But Aristotle's ambition didn't stop at tobacco. In 1932, the same year his father died, he made an observation that would change his life. The shipping magnates who hauled the tobacco made more money than the cigarette manufacturers. And 1932, in the depths of the Great Depression, was exactly the wrong time to enter the shipping business, which meant it was exactly the right time for someone willing to take risks. While everyone else was fleeing the shipping industry, Aristotle bought 6 freight ships for less than half their normal cost. Other businessmen thought he was insane. The global economy had collapsed. International trade had plummeted. Who buys ships when nobody's shipping anything? But Aristotle understood something they didn't. The depression wouldn't last forever. When the economy recovered, there would be massive demand for shipping, and ship prices would skyrocket. By buying when everyone else was selling, he positioned himself to dominate when the market turned. It was a gamble that would have ruined most men. For Onassis, it was the foundation of an empire, World War II, and the supertanker revolution. In 1938, Aristotle commissioned his first oil tanker. By the time World War II broke out, he owned 3. Then he made another brilliant, if morally questionable, decision. He registered his fleet of cargo ships to Panama, giving him tax-free status and dramatically reducing his overhead costs. This made him one of the lowest-cost shipping merchants in the world. During the war, he leased his tankers and other vessels to the Allies. The arrangement was enormously profitable. The Allies' Music desperately needed shipping capacity, and Aristotle offered reduced prices on military equipment in exchange for favorable contracts and protection. His fleet grew, while others' fleets were being sunk by German U-boat. After the war ended, Aristotle purchased 23 surplus Liberty ships from the United States at bargain prices. Then he embarked on the strategy that would make him legendary in the shipping industry. If you want to transport oil economically, you need bigger ships. Much bigger ships. In 1954 alone, he commissioned 17 supertankers. These weren't just large ships. They were revolutionary in scale, capable of transporting massive quantities of oil more efficiently than anything previously built. The economics were staggering. A supertanker could be paid for with a single 6-month lease, meaning the remaining 20 years of the ship's lifespan generated almost pure profit. During the Arab-Israeli Wars in 1956 and 1967, when the Suez Canal closed, Aristotle's supertankers reaped immense profits, Music, transporting oil from the Middle East via the Cape of Good Hope route. While other shipping companies struggled with the longer journey, Aristotle's supertankers made the economics work. By the early 1950s, Aristotle Onassis commanded a fleet larger than the navies of many countries. He was one of only 2 men in the world to own a private airline, the other being Howard Hughes of TWWA. His Olympic Airways, acquired in 1957, became known for its golden era of service quality, with gold-plated utensils and candles in first class and cutting-edge technology, like the Comet 4B jets he purchased in 1959. He fought Prince Rainier III for economic control of Monaco through his ownership of the Soye de Bandaire, which owned the Monte Carlo casino and resort properties. He bought the Greek island of Scorpios for $3.5 million, transforming it into a private paradise. His yacht, the Christina, named after his daughter, became one of the most famous vessels in the world, serving as his permanent residence and floating palace where the world's elite gathered. But all this wealth, all this power, all this success couldn't prepare Aristotle Onassis for what came next. Because while he was building an empire, he was also building a family that would bring him both his greatest joy and his most devastating pain. Family and the first marriage. On December 28, 1946, 40-year-old Aristotle Onassis married Athena Mary Tina Leanos. She was 17 years old. Tina was the daughter of Stavros G. Livanos, himself a shipping magnate, which made the marriage both a love match and a strategic alliance between 2 powerful Greek shipping families. For Aristotle, marrying into the Livanos family was more than fulfilling his romantic ambitions. It was a blow to his father-in-law and the old-money Greek traditionalists who had always held Onassis in low esteem. They saw him as a jumped-up refugee, a clever operator without proper breeding or connections. By marrying Tina Leanos, Aristotle forced them to accept him as family. The couple had 2 children, both born in New York City. Alexander arrived on April 30th, 1948, the same day his father launched an 18,000-ton tanker, the biggest then built in the United States. 5 years later, young Alexander launched a 45,000-ton tanker in Germany, smashing a champagne bottle against the Tina Onassis, named after his mother. Christina was born on December 11, 1950. For a time, the family projected an image of wealth and happiness. The children took part in grand ceremonies for the fleet new acquisitions. They traveled between magnificent properties. They wanted for nothing money could buy, but underneath the surface, music cracks were already forming. By the mid-1950s, Aristotle and Tina were living separately. According to Onassis biographer Peter Evans, the beginning of the end came when Tina found Aristotle in bed with a friend of hers at their home in Caponte, Music, the Château d'Acro. The betrayal shattered whatever remained of their marriage. But Aristotle's infidelity wasn't casual. He had already met the woman who would become the love of his life, the one relationship that would consume him entirely and never fully end. Her name was Maria Callas, and she was the most famous opera singer in the world, Maria Callas, The Great Love Affair. Summer 1957, Venice, Italy. At a party hosted by the famous gossip columnist Elsa Maxwell. Music. Aristotle Onassis met Maria Callas for the first time. Later, he commented to a friend that there was a natural curiosity between them. After all, they were the most famous Greeks alive in the world. Maria Callas, born in New York in December 1923 to Greek immigrants, had risen to become opera's greatest soprano. Her voice, her dramatic interpretations, her presence on stage, all of it was legendary. She had reinvented opera for the modern age, bringing emotional intensity and theatrical brilliance that audiences had never seen before. Critics lauded her performances, audiences worshipped her, and the opera world considered her irreplaceable. At the time of their meeting, Callas Music was married to Giovanni Battista Meneghini, an Italian industrialist 30 years her senior, who also served as her manager. The marriage had given her Italian citizenship in 1949 and provided the stability she needed to establish herself in Italy during the prime years of her career. Meneghini controlled her schedule, her finances, and much of her life, but he had also supported her when she needed it most. Aristotle was still married to Tina, though their relationship had deteriorated into a facade maintained for appearances and the children. The attraction between Aristotle and Maria was immediate, but it would take 2 years before it exploded into the open. In 1959, Aristotle invited Callas and Menaggini for a 3-week Mediterranean cruise aboard his yacht, the Christina. Other illustrious guests included former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and his wife, though Callas later remarked that she found Churchill boring. The cruise was supposed to be a sophisticated social gathering among the elite, a carefully curated display of wealth and culture. Instead, it became the beginning of the most public, tempestuous love affair of the decade. From the beginning, the romance was complicated. Callas initially found Onassis over-attentive and unattractive, but his persistent courtship gradually won her over. He pursued her with single-minded determination, using all his considerable charm and the romantic setting of the yacht journey to break down her resistance. For Aristotle, Callas represented something he'd never truly had. Someone whose music fame matched his own. Someone who understood what it meant to be at the pinnacle of achievement. Someone whose Greek heritage connected to his own identity in ways no one else could match. For Maria, Aristotle offered escape from a career that had become increasingly difficult. She was suffering from vocal problems and neurological issues that made performing painful. The scandals surrounding her temperamental behavior and the alleged rivalry with soprano Renata Tebaldi had taken their toll. The relentless pressure of maintaining her status as opera's greatest diva, music, was exhausting her. Aristotle offered a way out, a chance to fulfill her life as a woman rather than as a voice in service to art. By the time the 1959 cruise ended, it was evident to everyone aboard, including the alarmed crew and the other guests, that Aristotle and Maria had fallen completely in love. Their daily encounters had ignited passions that neither could hide. Tina Lavanos, who had enjoyed Callas's company at the start of the cruise, began to suspect the truth over the course of the journey. By the end, she hastily disembarked the ship, unable to watch her husband's affair unfold before her eyes. The press went wild. Gossip columns had been linking them romantically by the time the cruise began. By the time it ended, the Onassis and Menaggini marriages were clearly finished. In November 1959, Callas left her husband, ending a 10-year marriage. She later claimed publicly that her desire for a movie career had caused the breakup, not her romance with Onassis, but nobody believed the excuse. Tina filed for divorce in the Supreme Court of New York in 1960, citing adultery, the only recognized cause of divorce in New York at that time, and filed for custody of Alexander and Christina. The divorce was granted in June 1960 during the height of Aristotle's well-publicized affair with Callas. What followed was a 9-year relationship that oscillated between bliss and warfare. After both lovers divorced their spouses, they alternately adored and raged at each other. Friends described their relationship as finding excitement in physical altercations and thundering curses. The volatility was extreme, the emotional intensity overwhelming. Maria wanted to retire from the stage, settle down, and have children with Aristotle. She became pregnant in 1960, but lost the baby. According to some biographers, including Nicholas Gage, the child was a boy who died hours after birth on March 30th, 1960. The loss devastated her, but Aristotle was away when it happened, adding to her pain. She conceived again in 1963, but lost that baby as well. Again, while Aristotle was away, this time when she needed him most, he was hosting Jacqueline Kennedy and her music sister Lee Radziril aboard the Christina. The timing was cruel. Some sources claim she became pregnant a third time in 1966, but terminated the pregnancy at Aristotle's request, though this was never publicly confirmed. The relationship was deeply dysfunctional in ways that became increasingly clear as the years passed. Callas, despite her fame and talent, had little self-esteem when it came to personal relationships. She had grown up with a domineering mother who pushed her relentlessly toward success. Her marriage to Meneghini had been controlling. Now, with Aristotle, she found herself in another relationship where she held little power. Aristotle held all the power, controlling her emotionally while refusing to marry her even after both had divorced their spouses. He was attracted to her celebrity, which provided him with status and validation. He liked being seen with the world's greatest opera singer, but he wasn't ready to make the commitment she desperately wanted. Why wouldn't he marry her? The reasons were complex. Partly he enjoyed the freedom of their arrangement. Partly he still harbored ambitions that required different partnerships. And partly, having grown up watching his world burn, he had developed an aversion to permanent commitments. Everything could be lost in a moment. Everything could burn. Why trap yourself? Callas described her lover as the first person to truly understand and accept her warts and all. She played a nurturing role in his life, something he had never experienced with anyone else. His relationship with his mother had been cut short by her early death in 1912. Tina had never nurtured him in this way. Maria did, creating a dynamic that was part romance, part maternal care, wholly consuming. But his treatment of her was often cruel in ways both calculated and casual. At JFK's birthday celebration at Madison Square Garden in 1962, Maria attended and even performed. But the event is now remembered only for Marilyn Monroe's sultry rendition of Happy Birthday, Mr. President in her skin-tight, bejeweled gown. Aristotle attended with Maria, but he told her afterward that no one cared about Monroe's voice, just as no one cared about Callas's body. The comment was devastating, reducing her artistry to nothing while elevating Monroe's sex appeal over her own. Maria largely abandoned her career for Aristotle. Her vocal problems accelerated, her performances became rarer, and her focus shifted entirely to the relationship. When Franco Zeffirelli asked her in 1963 why she hadn't practiced her singing, she responded that she had been trying to fulfill her life as a woman. The great Maria Callas, who had commanded opera stages worldwide and reinvented the art form, had subordinated everything to a man who wouldn't marry her. In 1960, they appeared in public together throughout the year, no longer hiding their relationship. Photographers captured them holding hands, dining together, living openly as a couple. While dating Maria, Aristotle purchased the island of Scorpios, creating a private paradise where they could escape the world. It seemed like the relationship might stabilize, might evolve into the marriage Maria wanted. But Aristotle remained non-committal. Years passed. Maria waited. And then in 1963, everything changed. On the Christina, Aristotle hosted a gathering attended by Princess Lee Radziwill and her sister Jacqueline Kennedy. Lee was rumored to be having an affair with Aristotle, and Maria noticed his overt attention to both sisters. By this point, she had reached a detente about his infidelity. She accepted that he would never be faithful, that his need for conquest extended beyond her. After President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed on November 22, 1963, Jacqueline entered a period of deep grief. In August 1963, she had lost her newborn son, Patrick Bouvier Kennedy. Now she had lost her husband to an assassin's bullet. Lee Radziwill, music-sensitive to her sister's pain and perhaps eager to show her own connection to Aristotle, invited Music Jackie to join her on the Christina to recuperate. At the end of that voyage, the dynamics had shifted dramatically. Aristotle gave Jackie a diamond necklace. He gave Lee a bracelet so insignificant that she later sniped that not even 6-year-old Caroline would wear the thing. The message was clear. Aristotle had made his choice, but it would take 5 more years before he acted on it. 5 years of continued relationship with Maria, continued meetings, continued promises that never quite materialized into the commitment she wanted. 5 years of Aristotle pursuing Jackie Kennedy with careful discretion while maintaining his relationship with Maria. Maria watched it all unfold, powerless to stop it, clinging to the hope that Aristotle would eventually choose her. After all, they were both Greek. They understood each other. They shared a connection that transcended the superficial attractions of wealth and fame. Surely that meant something. Surely he would realize what they had together. she was wrong. And when Aristotle finally announced his intention to marry Jacqueline Kennedy in 1968, the news nearly destroyed Maria Callas completely. The Jackie Kennedy marriage, October 20th, 1968. On Scorpios, Aristotle Onassis' private Greek island, the billionaire married Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy, widow of the 35th President of the United States. The marriage shocked the world and nearly destroyed Maria Callas. Before the wedding, an agreement was reached between Music Onassis and Ted Kennedy, Jacqueline's former brother-in-law. Jackie would receive $3 million plus $1 million for each of her two children, Music Caroline and John Jr., to compensate for the $150,000 she received from the Kennedy Family Trust, which she would lose by remarrying. Upon Aristotle's death, she would continue to receive $150,000 each year for the rest of her life. The marriage made sense on paper. Aristotle was a collector of beautiful and famous women, and Jackie Kennedy was the most famous woman in the world. Marrying her elevated his status to heights even his shipping empire couldn't reach. For Jackie, Aristotle offered security, privacy, and escape from the constant media scrutiny in America. Her children would have protection, and she would have freedom to live life on her own terms. But the marriage was troubled from the start. During their time together in Acapulco, their relationship deteriorated so badly that Aristotle handwrote his will on a private jet, stipulating that if Jackie contested it, she would receive only the minimal spousal bequest dictated by Greek law, 5%, and would be responsible for all legal fees. The couple inhabited 6 music residences: her 15-room apartment at 1045th Avenue in New York City, her horse farm in New Jersey, his apartment at 88th Avenue Foch in Paris, his house in Athens, his house on Scorpios, and his yacht, Christina. Despite the wealth and properties, they spent increasingly little time together, and Maria Callas never really left the picture. According to Onassis' private secretary and other close associates, even while married to Jackie, Aristotle frequently met with Maria in Paris. They resumed what had become a clandestine affair, picking up where they'd left off. He allegedly told Maria that he had realized she was the true love of his life, but by then it was too late to repair what he had broken. The marriage to Jackie, according to many in Aristotle's Greek circle, was an act of hubris that the gods would punish. And punish him they did with a cruelty that would break the man who had survived the burning of Smyrna, poverty, war, and every business challenge the world could throw at him. The death of Alexander, January 22nd, 1973. Athens, 24-year-old Alexander Onassis, music, arrived at Helicon International Airport for what should have been a routine test flight. As president of Olympic Aviation, a subsidiary of his father's Olympic Airways, Alexander was overseeing pilot instruction for Donald McCusker, a potential new recruit. Alexander had earned his pilot's license in 1967 and accumulated 1,500 flying hours. His poor eyesight meant he couldn't hold an air transport license, but he could possess a commercial pilot certificate, allowing him to fly light planes and air taxis for emergency medical cases. He loved flying. It was one of the few things in his life that was truly his own, separate from his father's overwhelming influence. Alexander's relationship with his father had always been complicated. He and his sister Christina had been devastated by their parents' divorce in 1960, then horrified when their father married Jacqueline Kennedy in 1968. Alexander reportedly said about the marriage that his father loved the names and Jackie loved the money. The resentment ran deep. To make matters worse, Alexander was in a secret relationship with Fiona Campbell Walter, the former wife of Baron Hans Henrik Tyson Bonormissa Daschen. She was 16 years older than Alexander, beautiful, wealthy, and independent. Aristotle disapproved intensely. During the last year before his death, Alexander had serious confrontations with his father about both business matters at Olympic Airlines and his relationship with Fiona. He had announced to Aristotle that he would soon be leaving the company and marrying Fiona, determined to escape his father's unbearable psychological pressures and manipulations. On that January afternoon, Alexander boarded his personal PAJ 136L2 music amphibious aircraft with McCusker and Donald McGregor, his regular pilot who was recovering from an eye infection. The plan was to practice amphibious landings between the Saronic Gulf Islands of Ina and Poros. A few seconds after takeoff from runway 33, the plane's right wing dropped and stayed down. The plane crashed, losing control in a flight lasting no more than 15 seconds. All 3 men aboard suffered serious injuries. Alexander was rushed first to the American Military Base Hospital near the airport, then to the KAT Hospital in Athens. Aristotle was in New York City when he received the news. According to witnesses, he collapsed from the shock before swiftly making his way to the airport. The following day, January 23rd, he arrived in Athens with Jackie and went directly to the hospital. Alexander's mother, Tina, arrived from Switzerland with her new husband. Stavros Niarchos, Aristotle's chief business and social rival, who had married Tina after her divorce from Aristotle. Aristotle flew English neurosurgeon Alan Richardson from London to Athens, but Richardson told him what he didn't want to hear. Alexander had suffered serious cranial cerebral injuries. He had no chance of surviving. At 7:00 p.m. on January 23, 1973, 27 hours after the crash, Alexander Onassis died. The forensic diagnosis was severe brain hemorrhage from the injuries sustained in the accident. Miraculously, the 2 American pilots who had been with Alexander suffered only relatively minor injuries. The discrepancy haunted Aristotle. He refused to believe it was an accident. His son, a skilled pilot with 500 hours of experience, dies in a 15-second flight while the other 2 men survive. Impossible. It had to be sabotage. It had to be murder. Aristotle considered having Alexander's body cryogenically frozen, but was persuaded against it. Instead, Alexander was embalmed by Desmond Henley and buried next to the chapel on Scorpios. The private island that had been the setting for so much happiness now held the body of Aristotle's only son. Less than a month after Alexander's death, manslaughter proceedings were initiated against McCusker. In January 1974, 6 people were charged in connection with the crash, with indictments indicating that faulty controls had been fitted to music the plane. Aristotle blamed everyone: the CIA, the Greek military hunter leader Georgios Papadopoulos, Stavros Niarchos, even Olympic Airways employees. In December 1974, Aristotle took out a paid advertisement offering a $1 million reward for proof that Alexander's death had been the result of deliberate action rather than negligence. The official inquiry had concluded it was an accident caused by faulty controls installed during maintenance. Aristotle didn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. Accepting that his son's death was a meaningless accident, a random mechanical failure would mean it was pointless, unfair, a waste. The reward was never paid. All charges were later dropped. In 1978, 3 years after Aristotle's death, McCusker was awarded $800 by Olympic Airways. The official cause remained what it had always been: reversed aileron connecting cables during the installation of a new control column during maintenance. But for Aristotle Onassis, the truth didn't matter. His son was dead. His heir was gone. The boy he had groomed to take over the empire, to carry the Onassis name into the future, was buried on an island in Greece, 24 years old and never to grow older. Aristotle never recovered. He had survived wars, business rivalries, the destruction of his childhood home, poverty, and music exile. But he could not survive the death of his son, the final collapse. After Alexander's death, Aristotle Onassis aged overnight. Friends and associates reported that the vibrant, energetic man they'd known became a shell. He had always been superstitious, and now those superstitions consumed him. He believed Jackie had brought a curse on the family. Both John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy had been assassinated. Now his son was dead. The pattern seemed obvious to him. His relationship with Jackie deteriorated completely. She spent less and less time with him, preferring her life in New York to the grief-stricken man who blamed her for his son's death. The marriage that had shocked the world became an empty arrangement. Two people bound by a contract neither wanted anymore. Christina, his daughter, made it clear that she disliked Jackie intensely. She supported her father's belief that Jackie had brought some kind of curse into the family. The household became toxic, filled with suspicion, grief, and resentment. Aristotle's health began to fail. He had suffered from respiratory problems for years, but now they worsened dramatically. His business empire, once his greatest pride, lost its appeal. What was the point of building an empire if there was no son to inherit it? What was the point of any of it? Maria Callas, the woman he had abandoned for Jackie Kennedy, became his comfort again. They spent time together in Paris, reconnecting in ways they hadn't in years. Aristotle reportedly told Maria that he had realized she was the true love of his life. But the recognition came too late. The damage was done, and time was running out. In early 1975, Aristotle's condition worsened severely. He checked into the American hospital in Paris, bringing with him a red cashmere Hermes blanket that Maria had given him. Even at the end, surrounded by doctors and nurses, he clung to that physical reminder of the woman he had truly loved. On March 15, 1975, at age 69, Aristotle Onassis died of respiratory failure in Neuilly-sur-Seine, near Paris. The man who had built the largest private shipping fleet in the world, music, who had married a president's widow, who had amassed a fortune so vast that he was one of the few billionaires when that term actually meant something, died in a hospital bed broken by grief and illness. He was buried on Scorpios, the island he had bought during his relationship with Maria Callas, next to his son Alexander. Later, his sister Artemis would be buried there as well. And in 1988, Christina would join them after dying of a heart attack at age 37 in Buenos Aires. After Aristotle's death, Christina settled with Jackie for $25 million in exchange for Jackie not contesting the will. Jackie received her agreed-upon payments for the rest of her life. Christina inherited 55% of her father's fortune, then estimated at $500 million. The remaining 45% funded the Alexander S. Onassis Foundation, established in memory of the son who had died too young. Maria Callas never recovered from Aristotle's death. She had sacrificed her career, her voice, her health, all for a man who had married someone else, but never stopped loving her. On September 16, 1977, at age 53, she died alone and isolated in her Paris apartment of a heart attack. In 1979, her ashes were scattered off the coast of Scorpios, finally resting near the man who had been both her greatest love and her greatest pain. The legacy Aristotle. One's spent his life accumulating wealth and power on a scale few humans ever achieve. He built an empire from nothing, surviving catastrophes that would have destroyed lesser men. He married into shipping aristocracy, then married into American royalty. He owned an airline, controlled a casino, commanded a fleet larger than many nations' navies. He moved through the world as if he owned it, but in the end, none of it mattered. All the money couldn't save his son from a 15-second flight that ended in disaster. All the power couldn't prevent the slow deterioration of his health. All the fame couldn't fill the emptiness left by Alexander's death. His daughter Christina inherited his empire, but not his strength. She married 4 times, each marriage ending in divorce. She battled weight problems, depression, and the inability to find lasting happiness despite wealth beyond imagination. When she died at 37, the empire passed to her daughter, Athena Onassis Rousel, who was only 3 years old. The Christina yacht was eventually sold and converted into a floating museum. Olympic Airways was returned to the Greek government and went through various transformations. The Scorpio's island remained in the family until it was eventually sold decades music later. The properties, the businesses, the empire, all of it scattered and dissolved. What remains is the story. The refugee who became a billionaire. The man who loved Maria Callas but married Jackie Kennedy. The tycoon who built an empire but couldn't protect his son. The legend who discovered too late that wealth is meaningless without the people you love. In his handwritten will, composed during that Acapulco trip with Jackie, when their relationship was already crumbling, Aristotle left instructions for what would become the Alexander S. Onassis Foundation. It remains active today, supporting initiatives in education, medicine, and culture. The foundation promotes Greek culture worldwide, funds scholarships for Greek university students, and awards prizes for achievement in various fields. It's a fitting legacy for a man who rose from the ashes of Smyrna to build something extraordinary. But anyone who knew Aristotle Onassis in his final years would tell you that he would have traded it all. Every dollar, every ship, music, every property and possession for one more day with his son. Some empires fall to invaders, some collapse under their own weight. Aristotle Onassis's empire survived him, but the man himself fell to grief. He had conquered the business world and lost the battle that truly mattered. And that's the loneliest fall of all. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.